And now, the survival show that once survived a game of full contact chutes and ladders. In this episode, Justin Carrol drops by to share some privacy and security expertise. You'll learn how to build your first fully capable tinfoil hat, Jason Bourne identity style. Howdy and welcome to In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. This is episode number 241. I'm your host, Aaron, and you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. Justin, welcome back to In the Rabbit Hole, brother.
Aaron, thanks for having me on, man.
I'm looking forward to this because when we first started talking about it, I was like, we need to do another privacy episode. You were like, what about this? And I was like, oh, that sounds pretty exciting. So let's start here. We're going to try to become anonymous, super secret squirrel, tinfoil hat wearing crazy people in this episode. But first we have to ask the question, why would somebody want to become anonymous or as anonymous as possible?
Well, you could just be my personal brand of crazy and as crazy, like as far out on that spectrum as I am under that particular brand of crazy. So that's one reason. It could just be kind of like it is for me, largely just kind of a hobby, personal lifestyle decision. There's also some reasons that you might want to think about this, and everybody's threat model will kind of dictate. But man, can I tell you about a guy that I've been trying to get on a show that will not answer my emails? I won't call him out by name, but
yes.
He's a reporter who found out all about this intelligence operation that happened in Italy in 2004. And I won't reveal the name of the book because I don't want to put this guy on blast. But basically, with very, very minimal information that he could get from public records, he found all these like super high speed covert operatives back here at their homes in the United States. So,
oh, shit.
Pretty obvious. Maybe those guys should have read my book, but I assume most of your listeners aren't conducting covert operations on a regular basis anyway.
A regular basis, right.
Yeah. I mean, we've all got our skeletons, man.
Exactly.
So Michael and I actually just talked recently about a swatting incident where two gentlemen were in a dispute on the internet. And one guy said, yep, here's my address. Go ahead and do whatever you're going to do. The other guy did a swatting attack, which is basically you call the police in that town and report some sort of hostage incident or whatever. And the SWAT team comes to your house to kick in your door. And sure enough, they did. And someone was killed in that incident. And just absolute tragedy, man. Like it's terrible over some petty internet argument. Someone had to die. There's also situations you might be the victim of domestic violence. And I feel very passionately about this. And if anyone out there is involved in that community and would like some input from me, please feel free to reach out. But most spousal murders occur after a battered spouse leaves that relationship, that most volatile kind of time. So that person would have really good reason to do that. If you're a police officer, you engage with criminals every single day on a daily basis as your job. They are your clients. So it might not be the best idea for them to know where you live. If you're a concealed carry holder and you are involved in some sort of use of deadly force, you probably don't want the newspaper camped out on your lawn. Well, newspaper, what is it, 1898? The CNN camped out on your lawn before you even get home that day. So a lot of different reasons. If you do this, now that I'm involved in this, I'm actually finding a lot more people that take this stuff to the extreme, but by no means become, popularized or common. But if you choose to do this, you probably have your own personal mix of reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember it was a concern for me when I first started this show, and in a few other ventures I've been involved in. One was more extreme than the others, but there does definitely come up a point, maybe more for some than others, where you're like, I really wish that information wasn't out there. Or even I think a lot of people don't even realize just how much of their information really is out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of it out there, and it doesn't take very long at all to find it. And this is something I spend a lot of time showing students is, take your name, put it in quotation marks in Google, and search it. And if you still don't find anything, take your name and the town that you live in and search both of those things together. And guaranteed, unless you have taken some drastic steps to limit that information, you'll probably find your home address, your cell phone number, probably your email address. It's all out there, man. And pretty much everybody, every service that we use, every loyalty program we sign up, everything we use for convenience, credit cards, cell phones, everything else is all collecting that location. It's all being shared and sold. And, I throw out this super hackneyed catchphrase, but data really is the new oil. It is the multi-billion, possibly $1 trillion industry of like kind of that's emerged within our lifetimes.
Oh yeah, some of the big data that's out there is just astounding. There was a company I did some work for, and just the amount of information they had on people's homes was insane. And most of it went back 30, 35 years, or not most of it, I should say, but good chunks of it. And it was just like, whoa. And they were doing some neat stuff with it, and it was beneficial, but it's still, you look at it and you're like, oh my God, that's a lot of information. And what people are willing to pay for it, and some of the things that can be done with that information, it is pretty crazy.
Oh, it's ridiculous, man. It's ridiculous. And like even your Roomba is now mapping your house and selling or transmitting that floor plan back to its corporate overlords.
Which is really sad, because I was totally like, man, as soon as they get a Roomba that can do steps, I'm all over that. I am all over that. Well,
then it would have legs, and then we're all screwed, man.
Skynet comes in the form of a vacuum cleaner.
The one thing you would never suspect, like the most innocuous household appliance.
Oh my God, this is like a really bad B-80s horror movie. Oh God. That needs to be written at some point. Let's start at the beginning with the device that we carry around with us all day, every day, that probably has the most information on us, including a little bit of DNA, our phones.
Whoa, easy, killer.
You've gone on and on about your phone and how much you've locked things down. So let's start there. Why is having an anonymous phone, I've kind of given it away a little bit, but why is having an anonymous phone so important?
A couple of reasons to this. First of all, your phone is constantly collecting your location. It's storing that. And that's provided to not just your cell carrier, but every cell carrier's tower that your phone, like quote unquote, touches or sees. So your phone has a baseband processor that's underneath the A9 chip in your iPhone or whatever. It's a completely separate processor with a completely separate firmware. So as you're driving around, your phone is seeing all these towers saying, hey, can I talk on you? And that tower might say, no, you're on Verizon, I'm AT&T, you can't use me. But it still creates a record of that phone checking in. And of course, your Verizon towers that you're connected to maintain that record as well as a record of all your calls, all your text messages. And if you start to dig into that, man, that gets intensely personal. I mean, think about the people that you call. You call your family and friends, of course, which probably is not a big secret or anything that you're interested in hiding, but you probably also call your physician. You probably also call your therapist, I don't know, whatever you have in your life. And, I'm like, far be it for me to judge, but there's probably a little something in everybody's life that they wouldn't want to read about in the newspaper tomorrow morning. So that's just your calls, your text messages. If those are actual texts and not something like iMessage, those are all completely available to the phone company. They're stored forever by the company, at least 5 years. But in 5 years, data storage technology will be even cheaper and more readily available. So that stuff is stored forever and tied with you and your name, essentially from now until the end of time. So if you go to court, if you have a divorce and you go to court for that, there's the potential for every text you've ever sent to come back and haunt you if that attorney happens to get that subpoena through and be able to get all those records. So like that alone is a good reason for me not to really like that.
Mm-hmm.
The location tracking aspect is another thing, and a record of everywhere you go is also stored. And this occurs not just through your cellular stuff, but also your GPS is always collecting that. and giving that information to apps that send it back to Facebook and Google and whatever other analytics packs are running on all the apps that you have. And again, this stuff is all stored forever. If you go to the gun range, it knows which one you like. If you bowl on Tuesday nights, it knows that just off this location data. So that's really, really scary to me. And it's scary to me because it gives basically anybody that wants to use this data the ability to use it retroactively against me, right? Like you don't have to follow me around all day. You can just wait 15 years, pull all of it, and then nail me based on that.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So is this the metadata that everybody was freaking out about a few years ago and then suddenly forgot about, I guess, squirrel?
Yeah, and everybody collectively yawned and went right back to whatever they were doing and said, well, they're not listening to my phone calls. Who cares? But former NSA General Counsel Stuart Baker said that if we have enough metadata, we don't need content. Former NSA Director Michael Hayden said, we kill people based on metadata. Metadata is really important. That location metadata, if I have access to that, I know if you go to church, where you go to church, how often you go to church, what doctor you go to, what medical conditions you have, very likely based on which specialists you visit. I know if you've been to Planned Parenthood. I know if you've been to a marijuana dispensary. I know if you've been to a gun store. I know pretty much, for all intents and purposes, pretty much everything there is to know about you, including if your phone, not throwing shade on anybody, but if your phone happened to spend a night on a nightstand that it doesn't normally spend the night on. So like this gets right down into the gritty personal details of your life. And when you buy that subsidized phone from AT&T, Verizon, whatever, you give them access to not only all that data, but they can also now tie it to your name and your entire credit history because they do run a credit check on you before you walk out of their storefront with a $700 computer that they own in your pocket. So we think of a phone like a phone, and really what it is a tracking device that we've all opted into and all just socially agreed to pay $1,000 to be allowed to carry around in our pockets.
We'll be back after this quick break. Listener, do you get at least $3 a month worth of value out of ITRH? You should see what we do for the Roving Horde Armada members. Check it out today by visiting itrh.net. Members get access to episodes a day early, access to monthly virtual and in-person meetups in some areas, an invitation to the secret ITRH Armada Facebook group so you can chat about survival all day long with like-minded people. Access to every episode ever produced by ITRH. That's right, all the way back to the beginning, including one that was never aired. And those are just a few things you get with your membership when you sign up and become part of the ITRH Roving Horde by going to itrh.net. Again, that's itrh.net. Okay, so how do we start the process of becoming anonymous as it applies to our phone?
Okay, now we get into the good stuff. So first of all, you have to buy your phone outright. You have to pay cash for that device. There's no way to do a subsidized phone plan. Again, it's a $700 or $800, $900,000 computer that you're walking out of the building with. If they just gave those to everybody and said, hey, make sure you stay with Verizon for 2 years, they'd probably be out of business pretty quickly. So they run a credit check. You have to provide true name information for that. If you provide anything else, you are committing identity theft, and that is a crime. I don't recommend you commit any crimes in anything I would ever tell you to do. So you have to buy the phone in cash. You have to just buy it in one fell swoop. And easily enough, you can just go to the Apple store and say, hey, I want this phone. When the guy brings it out, you hand him $1,000 in cash or $700 in cash or whatever. And he will look confused for a moment and then have to go rummage around in the back for change for half an hour. And then you can walk out with that phone that you have not tied your name to. So that's like kind of a different way, I think, than most Americans think about their phones. I think Europeans, most of the rest of the world is not used to the subsidized phone plan. So that part's not a hard sell to them. But Americans want what they want right now without paying for it. So
right,
it's a little bit different mindset shift for us.
Okay, so you've got to get out of the mentality of financing your entire life.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Step one, now what do we do?
now you have to put service on this phone, right? So this is so easy to do. I don't know. And there is no reason not to do this unless you absolutely can't afford to pay up front for a phone. But if you can buy a phone in cash, there are just a ton of options for phone service that don't require any form of identification or really anything else at all
Huh.
in the form of these prepaid plans. And most people think of those as like, I don't know how to say this without sounding kind of like a jerk, but I think most people have this mindset of those are like poor people plans
Yeah.
or whatever,
Yeah.
but they're not. It's the same companies that you already get your phone service through. Verizon offers these, AT&T offers these, and the reason they're so much cheaper is that they're betting that most people won't buy their phones up front. So, as a point of comparison, I had a subsidized phone for years, like most everybody else, until I really started getting into this. And when I left, I was paying, I'm going to say, north of $100 a month for, I think, 8 gigabytes of data a month, unlimited talk and unlimited text. And it's really the data that I care about. And I needed, like, I don't know if that's a lot or not, but it was about what I used every month with all the mapping I do with all the travel. Currently, I'm paying $60 a month for unlimited data up to 22 gigabytes unthrottled, unlimited talk, and unlimited text on a SIM card that I walked into Best Buy, paid $10 for, and a refill card that I paid $60 for and walked out without providing them any information whatsoever. And
Huh.
I, I suppose maybe this should be obvious, but also you have to pay cash for this stuff. If you slap your credit card down, like those numbers, the IMEI on that phone, which is recorded at the time of the transaction, and your credit card number are tied together. So if you're really shooting for this full on anonymity, cash for everything, everywhere you possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
But man, the prepaid plans, T-Mobile has plans for around 40, $45 that are unlimited data. I tried that. Didn't work super great for me because I travel to some military bases that are way out in the boonies, and I just got tired of not having service. It works great if you live in downtown Atlanta, and not so much if you live at Fort Benning, Georgia. So T-Mobile didn't really work out for me. It works for a lot of people. AT&T has a prepaid plan for 60, $65 for unlimited data. Verizon has one for $50 or $55 for unlimited data. And usually you can get set up on these at Walmart, Target, Best Buy. You just have to go in and buy the SIM card and buy the little reload card that you scratch the number off at the end of the month. And another great thing about these is if you prepay in advance, and I'll talk about how you can do that later, if you just set up an automatic bill pay for these, they will usually give you like a $5 or $10 discount every month too. So
Huh.
this is not just an anonymity thing. This is also a massive monthly savings plan for me.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Okay, that's really neat.
I'm not sure why these aren't more popular. And there's even like if you're really hurting financially, there's Cricket, Ting, Straight Talk, just a ton of these prepaid phones that give you like good data plans. And most of those second tier ones like Ting and Straight Talk are what we call virtual networks. They basically piggyback on Verizon or AT&T's network by paying
Mhm.
them some sort of like small fee. And typically your data is a little slower, but I mean it still works just fine.
Right, right. That's okay. That's pretty neat. I think that makes sense. And I guess the stigma is probably there because those are the phones that usually impoverished people end up, that's their only choice. So I guess that gets stigmatized that way. But it would make sense that it's actually cheaper because there's no risk to the phone company. They're getting their money up front. They're getting it right away.
Yeah, and I bet tomorrow, if every American said, screw this, I'm going to go to these plans, you would start to see those plans be adjusted to reflect basically common carrier rates as they are now because the phone company's like, oh man, we're losing a bunch of money. But I feel like right now, such a small percentage of people are doing this. It's still financially viable to offer it, and they get more customers overall. So
Right.
it's win-win, man. I don't see a downside to doing this at all. Now, the other piece of this is I never use my phone number. So I bought this SIM card and I'm like, I am never, ever, ever going to make a call from the actual cellular connection. Will use the data for other things.
Huh.
Also, I'll be upfront. Here's a problem with these prepaid plans is these numbers get reused quite a bit because people, buy a phone and use it for a month and then turn it off or throw it away or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So they keep reusing these numbers. So it's getting all these junk calls. So basically, what I did is I just found a local fast food restaurant in the same area code that I set my phone number up in. I forwarded all my calls to that. And so now my phone never rings. And I'm sure some Burger King somewhere is getting pre approved college loan debt forgiveness calls all the time.
Okay. All right. That's a good tip.
So you do so like I mentioned, you can set this up to automatically bill pay, but that requires that you go online and set up an account. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend you use a fake name. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. I will say this. I will say read the terms of service, operate within the limits of the terms of service. But frequently you don't have to put in a name at all because there will already be some text input in that field like registered user or account holder or whatever. I typically just leave it at whatever it is. And for my payment system, I use a service called privacy.com. And I wouldn't be surprised if I've talked about this on your show before, but privacy.com, it's a free service where you set up, you basically give it access to withdraw funds to debit funds from your bank account. And it gives you a virtual credit card number for every single merchant that you have a service with. You can set up a maximum charge every month. So I just set that at $50 every month, leave that card turned on, and it just takes care of itself. It's a self-licking ice cream cone. I don't have to do anything to it. I have phone service and I'm good to go. Now, that's vulnerable to law enforcement subpoena and whatever, but not really my threat model, man. I'm not hiding from I mean, I basically work for the government, so
yeah, so it'd be hard for you to hide from them.
They know where to find me. Yeah.
So there's a couple interesting points here that you've brought up. The privacy one is really cool, and it's the privacy.com, and it's one I keep meaning to do myself for a bunch of stuff. How did they make their money? Because like if they're not making the money off you, then then you're not the customer. They're buying data or something. So how do they make money?
They make their money off the ACH transactions. So, all right. So one thing I've learned as I've gotten into this is there is a world of difference between a credit card and a debit card, legally speaking, and just practically speaking, and how they work behind the scenes. I mean, it's transparent to us as the end user because we swipe the card, transaction gets approved, and we go on about our day. But there is a massive difference between the two.
Yeah.
So because they're debiting directly from your bank account, you're not paying with a credit card. So they get a very, very small percentage of that fee. You don't pay anything more, but they're very transparent about how they make their money and their privacy policy. And the more people that use privacy.com and the more they use it, the more well-funded that company is. And I have no issue with that whatsoever.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So, we started
Great
off.
Question, though.
Somebody might get confused by the iPhone thing in the beginning. You can do this with an Android too, I'm assuming.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one other thing that I'm going to mention in my personal setup that is peculiar to iPhone for now. But yeah, you could go out and buy a brand new Samsung Galaxy 15 or whatever we're on now, or a Google Pixel, or a $40 throwaway phone from Walmart, for that matter, if you wanted to, do the exact same thing. You register that prepaid SIM card and you pay for it either with something like privacy.com, which is not completely anonymous. I don't want to give that impression. The best anonymity would be the little card refills. But yeah, Android, iOS, so far, everything I've talked about will work on both.
How long do those things actually last? You go out and you buy one of these prepaid things, and if it's going to be a secondary phone, for whatever reason you wanted a secondary phone, if you go out and let's say you buy, I don't know, prepay for it. So do you prepay by the month or do you buy minutes? How does that? Because I was thinking it was like in blocks of hours or something that you were buying and that it would expire or not expire.
So yeah, typically you got to look at the packaging. So if it's through like AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, Sprint, the big names in the industry, that's going to be a monthly plan. And basically when you go online to register that account, that's when you will choose like what level of plan you want, how much, all of these are tiered. So if you only need 1 gigabyte of data every month, you could probably get that for $15 there's a company called Mint Sim that has just incredibly cheap SIMs. And I think their strategy is just to gain a bunch of users and then
Hmm.
bump that up. But then on the other hand, there's like the track phone kind of thing where you pay $20 for, I don't know, 120 minutes of talk and 500 texts or whatever. But pay attention to the packaging. But if it's one of those top tiered ones, which I recommend going with just because the service is so much better, they're probably going to be a monthly thing where you have to pay for 30 days cash on the barrelhead in advance instead of post paying like we do currently.
Right, right. Okay, okay. So, but there are some phones that you just buy a block of minutes or whatever. And I guess I wonder if those expire or not.
I think TrackPhone initially made its reputation on you buy this phone and put 20 minutes on it and you can leave it in your glove box for 10 years. And if you break down, you can call someone or something like that. I'm not sure how that works now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was just curious, always nice to have like a backup phone in a car bag or something like that. Or, burner phone for, whatever things,
Well, one thing you could do, it would be a little tricky if you needed that phone in a huge hurry, is buy the phone, buy the SIM card, and don't activate the SIM card. And those are usually good for like a year or two after the date of purchase before you have to activate it. And most of these, once you activate that SIM, if you run it for 30 days and then don't pay the bill, you will still retain that number for, I think, sometimes as long as 6 months before they take your number away from you and then you have to start over.
Okay. So you forwarded all your calls to Burger King and they're now paying your student loans or at least getting the phone calls about it or whatever. How do you make phone calls?
I get kind of a little bit of a perverse kick out of imagining some kid at Burger King answering the 100th call about debt forgiveness or trying to offer me a new credit card or whatever.
Uh-huh.
So I use an app called Sudo, Sudo, and this is what I said is iOS only currently. Android, I have it on good authority, will be along shortly, but it's an app that I install on my phone. They give you 9 pseudos, SUDO again, but they're pseudo identities. It's an app with 9 little cards, and each one has its own phone number and its own email address. And you can place calls from that number. You can send text from that number. You can get text to that number, and you can receive calls at that number. And I basically have those broken out as this is my personal one that I give out to Aaron Frankel and my mom and my buddies. I have my work one that I give out to people, work associates. I have my bank one that I give to my bank so they can get in touch with me, or in case I need to call them, I'm calling from a known trusted number. 9 phone numbers, man, there's almost nothing you can't do with 9 completely separate phone numbers. And I really like to segregate those out because we'd be really suspicious if someone asked for our social security number, even though it's really not that useful anymore and it's really not tied to that much. But your phone number is tied to everything. It's tied to your Facebook, your Instagram, your Tinder. It's tied to your bank account. It's tied to your Gmail account. It's tied to your Amazon account. Your phone number just brings everything in your life together with one single 10-digit number. So really careful about breaking those out and giving those kind of carefully to a segregated set of users.
Mm-hmm.
And I still get incoming calls on that. I still can place calls out. And I can do it on Wi-Fi only if I want to turn put my phone in airplane mode and just use Wi-Fi. I can totally do that. The other thing I use frequently, and actually what we're talking on right now, is a product called Wire Secure Messenger, which is this encrypted messaging application that basically lets me send and receive calls wire to wire. Both parties have to have the app. We can do voice calls, we can do video calls, we can do file transfers, we can send text messages, GIFs, funny photos, videos. I try to move all my conversations to that. But if I have to give out a phone number, it's definitely not going to be the number that's associated with my SIM, because once that's spilled, once that's out there, that's now an identifier that can be used to track my location physically. So I'm trying to avoid ever giving this number to, I mean, if I give my SIM card number to you have no ill intention about me, but you'll probably type Justin Carrol in, type that phone number in, and it'll go into your contact list. And then there's probably some app on your phone that harvests that contact list and sells it to someone else. And now I've just lost the privacy of that number again.
Oh, wow. That's deep. That's deep stuff. Okay. Not deep in like the philosophical, but that's some deep privacy right there. Wow. Okay.
I told you we were going to get a little off.
Oh
there,
no,
man.
I like it. Keep going. Keep going.
So yeah, like, man, it blows my mind how crazy, just deep the tentacles of your phone are into your life. Like I've tried, and I can't go 20 minutes without checking my phone. It's just, and I'm someone that's super aware of this stuff. It's man, it's almost inescapable. So I do everything I possibly can to break that tie between my name and all this activity on a map somewhere.
Mm-hmm. So do you go so far as to ever use one of the Faraday bags? I mean, you don't have to answer that one if you don't want to.
No, I do. Probably not as much as some people, or as much as some people would recommend, but I definitely do use one. Man, I know this is about to go off the rails, but I really try to avoid ever bringing my phone to my house or to where I'm staying for an extended period of time with it on. And there's a reason for that. Even if I put it in airplane mode, that activity is still being seen, it's still being tracked. And even though it's not tied to my name right now, I'm probably going to screw up in the future. I'm probably going to make a mistake, do something wrong, and suddenly they know that phone belongs to me. And it doesn't matter how well I hid all that other activity. Now it's just like, oh, same phone, same name. That's him the whole time. So I've just lost all that privacy that I've worked so hard for.
Mm.
And even though I can put the phone in airplane mode, I mean, really, I could even take the SIM card out. The problem is, we just had this massive article a couple of months ago that Google was tracking every single Android phone, even with location services completely disabled, even if the phone did not have a SIM card in it. Those phones were all still being tracked.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's pretty deep. And Google was pretty unapologetic about it. They're like, yeah, read the privacy policy, dude. Even though the privacy policy is fairly ambiguous about that and does not say anywhere that even if you disable location services completely, we will still collect on you, which I think is borderline unethical.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I do use a Faraday bag, probably not as much or as often as I should, being the privacy dude. But yeah, very very useful thing. And it's, if your listeners don't know, it's basically a like a heavy duty nylon bag that's lined with this very thin, basically woven metal fabric. And it's not like carrying around a metal box. It's a very flexible bag, but you put your phone in there, and like that metal, the tightness of the weave and all that's calibrated to basically block your Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and cellular signals and prevent your GPS from receiving signals. Because if your GPS doesn't transmit, get a lot of questions about this too. The GPS chip in that phone doesn't actually transmit, but it's constantly collecting your location based on triangulation, and then it shares it with, definitely with the hardware, with the phone, where it goes back to Apple or Google. And in many cases, it probably shares it with some apps on your phone, which transmit those back too. And almost every app under the sun is running a Google Analytics addendum or a Facebook Analytics product.
Huh. Okay. Wow, that's terrifying.
Yeah, man. Like, this sucks. You almost have to go 100% in, or just not bother. It's such a just such a comprehensive tracking program that I'm not even sure how this came about. Like, I want to put the blame on Google and Facebook, but I don't know where the blame really lays. If it lays with us for being so just complacent about this. I mean, not that I'm any better than anyone else, man. I just happen to nerd out on this stuff and find an awesome partner that also nerded out on this stuff, and we just fed each other's neuroses, and here we are. But
well, and I think it does actually make sense. I mean, human beings are inherently lazy, and we gave up most of our privacy in the name of convenience first, and then presumably under the name of security. Yeah, I think it's unfortunate, but to me, it's not surprising where we've ended up. Where every move we make is, well, not to go down the road of regurgitating a Police song, but
well, we are in a. I mean, like, everybody thinks that's a love song, but actually listen to it. It's pretty creepy.
It's extraordinarily creepy. Yes. So let's move on to driver's license. I don't know where we're going with this one, but I'm really excited.
Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go rent a small telephone closet in an office building and use that as our address and get our driver's license there. And then just tell the maintenance guy to slip the mail under the door. No, I'm
Okay.
just kidding. But that was in like a 1980s, 1990s era privacy book that was very popular. And I don't mean to make fun of the guy. He's a very, very intelligent guy. And he came up with most of his techniques through a very legitimate need. But that, unfortunately, those techniques don't really work anymore. I feel like if I went to an office building and asked to rent a closet and get my mail there, I would have some pretty serious scrutiny because people would think I'm probably a criminal or
Yeah.
at very least someone kind of up to something that they don't really want to be involved in. So the another problem post Patriot Act is you can't put a post office on your driver's license. You have to give the DMV RMV a physical address. They want to know where that car is garaged, and that presents a conundrum because you're you would think your state government maybe should kind of have your back, or at least I would. But here's another thing that most people don't know is there are 16 states that monetize driver's license databases and sell those to data brokers, including your photograph that they take of you, which, man, I think is just terrible. Like, it's not like a driver's license is optional. You really have no choice but to opt in to that just really kind of shabby system, I think. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to put my home on my driver's license because now that's an estate database that's going to get sold. It's going to be on my driver's license. So everywhere I go that I have to show an ID, and frequently, this is becoming more common. Places that sell certain products like pharmacies, if you go to a pharmacy, frequently they'll scan the barcode on the back of your, or the QR code on the back of your ID, which collects all the
Huh.
information on it. So I just don't want that stuff going out. I've worked very, very hard to make my residence private, and I don't want to give that information away every time I have to show an ID to someone. So, or I don't know, maybe you've been in a casino lately, but they will scan your ID with a little like pistol shaped scanner that they carry around.
Mm.
And I don't like that at all. So here's where it's about to get a little nuts. All right. There are 3 states in the United States that honor what is called nomad status. And this is really for people that are full-time RVers. So we've got a couple, actually you helped me interview
Mm-hmm. Sure did.
Jesse and Cameron. So we have a couple that basically decided to sell their house, retire in their mid 30s, and cruise around the country for a few years in an RV. What do they do for mail? They don't have a house because they've sold their house. They don't have, I mean, where do they get their mail? What state gets to claim them as a resident and collect taxes from them if they're in 50 different states throughout the year and don't spend a significant percentage of their time in any state? So there are 3 states, Florida, Texas, and South Dakota, that will let you claim nomad status. And you set up what's called a personal mailbox, a PMB, with a PMB service. And that is where you are registered to vote. That's where your driver's license comes from. That's where your vehicles are registered. That's basically considered your legal residence for all intents and purposes. And even though I didn't plan to live like a nomad lifestyle when I signed up for this, I kind of ended up doing it because right now I'm kind of just bouncing around from Airbnb to Airbnb with my crazy work schedule. And I figure you have to pay rent somewhere. So it might as well be in a nice apartment somewhere instead of a hotel.
Mm-hmm.
So, but pretty much anyone can do this. You have to set up your residence privately first. But once you've set that up, you definitely don't want to put it on your driver's license, which completely undoes everything. So one of these states is potentially an option for you. You can still own property in other states. You can still own a residence in other states. Most of these states are set up so that you almost never have to go back to them, maybe once a year to have your vehicle inspected, but pretty painless system overall. And for me, I move a lot, partially because of the privacy thing, but also partially because, well, I get kicked out of a lot of people's houses. So,
A lot of people
um,
or a lot of girls' houses?
mm, I think you know the answer.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I move around a lot, and this kind of makes it so I don't have to call the bank every 6 months and be like, "Hey guys, sorry, I need to change my address again because I moved again." This lets me have a really stable mailing address. I don't have to be in that state all the time. Basically, I just log into my forwarding services website and say, "Hey, send my mail here on this date." It's pretty painless overall, man.
You refer to it as a PMB in the beginning?
A PMB, a personal mailbox, and that is an official term under the United States Postal Service. Again, there's only 3 states, Texas, Florida, and South Dakota, that recognize those. And if you happen to live in Texas, Florida, or South Dakota, man, there's really very little reason not to use one of these. They're just incredibly easy to use. They cost, I think, just for a personal service, maybe 150 bucks a year.
That's not bad at all.
Yeah, it's not bad. And you can, I mean, if you live close enough to your service, you could just drive in and pick up your mail. And so I have to maintain a postage fund because every time they send a package out to me, they print up a prepaid postage thing, which maybe 100 bucks a year, and I'm good for postage for the whole year. But if you live in Florida near one of these places and can just drive in once a week and pick up your mail, that's a little less cost for you. And you truly are a resident of that state. You live there. You might as well utilize that service.
That's pretty neat. So you set up the PMB first, and then you can register your driver's license to that PMB.
Yeah. So basically, how it worked for me is I set up my PMB online. I sent them a power of attorney and registered my vehicles in that state, and they mailed me license plates back. I was still holding a driver's license in the state that I was selling my house at the time. So I'm living in that house while it's on the market. But I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go all in. So I signed up online, sent in my power of attorney, got my license plates in the mail, put it on my cars. Now I'm an official resident of state X. Now, to get my driver's license, I actually had to drive down there, get my vehicle inspected, spend the night there, and then the next morning go to the driver's license office with my paperwork. And you have the typical things that you have to prove residency, a bank statement in my name with an address in that state, or at my desired address, and a utility bill. I think I used maybe a cell phone bill or something like that.
Hmm.
And that proved my residency. I got my driver's license. I walked out. I hopped in my car. I drove back to wherever I came from, and boom, I'm a resident of that state.
Very cool. So you mentioned a private address, and like we said, you got to sleep somewhere. You got to lay your head down somewhere. How does that work?
Okay, yeah. So I do have a base of residence, and currently I have an apartment. And if you're a renter, man, you're in that lease at most for another year. So in 12 months, at absolute most, you could completely change your situation and go completely private. Here's what you can't do. You can't go to the big apartment complex down the street and ask to rent one of their apartments because invariably they will run a credit check on you. You can never use false information with any kind of financial verification. It's considered identity theft. It's a crime. Just don't do it.
Hmm.
Any big apartment complex with a clear flow chart of what they have to do to let a new tenant in will run a credit check on you and possibly a tenant background check. So you can't do that. What you can do is find a place on Craigslist, and this requires a little bit of financial planning. You have to have maybe a little money in the bank, but a lot of places on Craigslist that are offered by individuals for rent, you can just pay cash and say, "Hey man, could we just keep my name off of this? I'll pay here's 3 months now. I will always stay a month ahead of the rent." I have yet to be turned down with that offer of, "Hey, I will give you cash in an envelope every month on the day the rent is due, or or before. You will never have to come looking for me to get the rent. I'll always stay a month ahead." And you just be a good tenant, and no one ever has a problem with that. If you're buying a home, it's a little bit trickier. And what I recommend you do is use what is called a property trust or a land trust. And this basically puts the property into the name of a trust. And you can name that trust whatever you want. you do have to define a beneficiary for it. And this gets a little bit legally complicated and requires setting up maybe a couple different entities, but you can still finance your home through certain lenders. You have to find a lender that's willing to work with a trust, but man, you can name that. And a lot of people use trust, so this isn't super alerting. Everybody's not like, this guy's a paranoid maniac.
Hmm.
They're like, okay, this guy's smart and he's thinking about his future and he's doing estate planning now. So we have an episode of the podcast where we interviewed a guy who runs a service called Mr. Land Trust. And man, just incredibly thorough and well versed guy on how to set one of these up. He has a bunch of services to teach people how to do this. I'm not advertising for his product, but that's episode 61 of the Complete Privacy and Security podcast.
It was a really good episode.
Dude, I can't even touch the information that guy can. I would say check out his stuff. I don't currently own real estate. I'm kind of determined to pay cash for something. So right now it's not really something I'm able to do.
Hmm.
I'm fairly determined to wait until I am, but when I do, I guarantee you I will put that property into a land trust unless something major changes, because it gives you, first of all, it gives you a huge amount of privacy. It insulates you somewhat from lawsuits, and it gives you quite a bit of asset protection. So I don't see really any downside to doing a land trust, except that it's very, very modestly more expensive. Like, it might be a few $100 more expensive to buy a house that, quite honestly, is probably going to be in six figures anyway. And it's a little bit more work. You have to have an attorney that's willing to work with a trust and that sort of thing. But man, massive, massive privacy benefits. So at this point, let's recap. So I've rented or purchased my property completely privately. My name is not tied to it in any discoverable way. So right now I have this property that no one knows that I belong to. So that address is public record. You can look it up, but you're not going to see Justin Carrol on the bottom line anywhere. You're not going to see my name anywhere on that. If you look up my driver's license, you're like, oh, I'll get this guy. You're going to find me in some completely different state's driver's license database. That's where all my mail goes.
Uh-huh.
So at this point, I'm pretty confident in what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. So is it at this point that you buy your getaway car?
It's at this point that you start burying gold in the backyard.
Good deal. A car seems like it would be another thing. Like, the house is crazy that you can do that and put it in trusts and everything. And that was an awesome episode, by the way. But a car feels like it's going to be, is that something that you can do anonymously with too? Or how does that work?
So, man, I'll be honest. I'm a cheap guy when it comes to cars. I'm actually very kind of cynical when it comes to cars. And I think we've bought into this car as a status symbol thing and whatever else. I have paid cash for my last 4 vehicles, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I unless something like just radically changes in my life, I have a massive change of heart, or I become completely broke, which I'm not ruling it out. I will, it is my goal to never finance a vehicle ever again.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to pay cash. And then I can do one of two things. I can register that to my PMB in South Dakota, Texas, or Florida, and they will mail me license plates out. Florida and Texas, I have to get a vehicle inspection once a year, so I have to drive down there once a year. Not a huge deal with my travel schedule. I can usually work it in, but I can do it that way. If the police scan my license plate, or this is becoming more terrifying to me, the system of automated license plate readers, which are affixed to overpasses and telephone poles, and sometimes to the top of vehicles. And it's some astounding number, like 90% of automated license plate readers are privately owned by companies that just drive around collecting license plates and then aggregate all this data. And sometimes they'll sell access to police departments.
Huh.
I'm sure they're also making money selling that to other places.
Right.
So I'm becoming a little bit less confident in this method as well, because if I'm staying at my Airbnb for a month and I park on the street, if that gets picked up by an automated license plate reader, it has me there however many times it gets picked up. So that name goes directly back to me, even though it's a Texas address or a Florida address or whatever. So I'm a little less confident in this method. The other thing you could do is put it into a property trust, which is much like a land trust. Works very, very similarly. The license plate would register back to that trust. And if you've done it correctly, it's very difficult to discern who the ultimate owner of that vehicle is.
Huh. That's really cool. Those usually, I mean, it does take a little bit of work, but those usually aren't terrible. I mean, those and living trusts and all that other stuff is usually not absolutely terrible to set up.
Yeah, and I'll probably bet, like, I'm buying cheap cars right now. I have been for the last several years just because I have other financial priorities than having a really nice expensive car. But before I do that, I'm not at that step yet of putting a vehicle into a property trust. But when I do, I'll probably spend a little bit more money, get something that I'm going to, hope to get 5 or 10 years out of. So, and not that I'm buying cars that I'm like expecting to get 3 weeks out of, but
Yeah.
something that's good that I'm going to hang on to for a while because of that additional work.
I gotcha. Justin, this has been some really cool stuff today, and it's as off the wall as I think a lot of it sounds. Most of it's just not that difficult. Like it takes a little work and everything, but it's just not that difficult for what ends up being a lot of peace of mind and a lot of resilience against different threats than we usually talk about around here. So really neat stuff. You're on a regular basis, but for new people who don't know who you are and don't know what you got, what is your website address and how do they get it and what are they going to get when they get there?
So my blog is operational-security.com. I blog there fairly regularly, and there's, I think at this point, over 300 posts, just a ton of stuff about privacy and security. There's also my book that I co-wrote, The Complete Privacy and Security Desk Reference. You can find that on Amazon.com.
Awesome. What is your website address one more time?
Operational-security.com.
Justin, as always, dude, thank you so much for coming on today, and I look forward to the next one.
Man, thanks for having me on and letting me indulge in some crazy stuff.
Show notes, links to Justin, and other resources from this episode can be found by going to intherabbithole.com/E241. Support the show and get I2H Roving Horde Armada members-only benefits. Like what, you ask? Great question. How about twice monthly virtual hangs, the on-demand bug-out bag class, and access to the secret I2H Armada Facebook group? And that's just to name a few things you get when you go to I2H.net to become part of the Roving Horde Armada. Now, the bug-out bag class is an I2H exclusive course made just for members. It's over an hour in length and packed full of detailed information about car bags, get-home bags, and even bug-out bags. Go to I2H.net to read more. Again, that's I2H.net to find out about all the exclusive members-only benefits. With that, we wrap up episode number 241 from the Lone Star State. Till next time, stay safe and sound.